Hey everybody, welcome to the Talk Lab podcast. Today we're talking all things AI, artificial intelligence. I'm joined today by Dr. Matt Oefinger. Matt holds a PhD from MIT in artificial intelligence and has experience in the healthcare, biotech, medtech, and financial industries. Let's get into it. I mean, I know you know this, but nothing is bigger than AI right now. You're in such a huge position.
Yeah, it's outrageous, right? I mean, it's like it's just, and it's so funny. It's so comical to me that my PhD work was in AI, and before AI was cool, and so I couldn't make a living in AI at the time because the field didn't exist except in academia.
Right.
Right.
How did that happen? How did you get? How did you find yourself, as an undergraduate, interested in AI?
I don't know what the pool was. Maybe it just kind of had a cool name. I found that there was one opportunity as an undergraduate. I started taking a few graduate courses at my school, and there probably weren't a whole lot offered. There was one in computer graphics, which I took and loved, and then there was one in AI, and I thought it sounded neat. I thought the course turned out to be relatively interesting. And so then it was a pure stroke of luck, really, that as a graduate student, I pursued AI. But in so doing, I've got a skill set, I think, that's pretty interesting. But again, I couldn't utilize really straight out of graduate school. I finished my PhD in 2006 at MIT. And when I left MIT, there was no Google or Facebook or Netflix or any of these places where you could apply AI skills. So I went into sort of straight, engineering type of work, straight software engineering type of work.
Yeah, we'll describe that for me. So there's a CDO and a CAO. What are the differences between those two roles?
Yeah, and I do think they're different roles. I do think they're different roles functionally, I should say. I should be clear that it's totally okay and common for those two roles to be combined. So you do often find that you have a CDAO or kind of a chief data analytics officer. It's one person doing both. But the CAO at its core is tasked with providing or creating insights out of data, information out of data, right? Moving beyond raw data to something more that's digestible and understandable. The CDO is very much a prerequisite role, I would say, right? And it's very much about getting the data house in order, getting all the data organized, getting into either a warehouse or a data lake, getting the right databases structured such that database can be consumed by those who are doing analytics. And so I look at those roles as somewhat sequenced. The CDO is in front of the CAO, and the CAO can only be as good as the CDO, right?
Right. So how do you think that business leaders should be looking at those two roles as it relates to the overall data strategy that the company's going to ultimately every company has to have a data strategy today, and I'm sure every company doesn't know that. But how do you look at that strategy, and where would your mind be with that?
Yeah, so I kind of am a little bit biased toward combining the roles, and it's either that or having some very, very close interplay between the roles where kind of you can clearly align the objectives. I think when you've got two separate kind of CDO and CAO, their agendas can appear to be different when they shouldn't be, and you can sort of remove that friction by having a single person do the role. So if it's possible, I'm sort of inclined to combine those two roles. That said, if you can't, I think it's important in the interview process to make sure that you have a very good vibe going on between the two roles, right?
This has got to be a big spectrum with leadership in business today, where probably people that have had vision, running big companies, are thinking, how do they get inside of your head? How do they understand all of this all at once? So you've been a leader in the industry for a long time. How do you work with a leader in helping them kind of get their head around what are the market potentials for what the company's been doing, or how the company might implement future strategy, but giving them some orientation, I guess, is the biggest question. How do you interact with them that way?
Yeah, so I try to go at it from two ends. I think that there's a lot of focus on kind of thought leadership and the big ideas.
Mm-hmm.
I do think those are important. The big ideas are important. Equally as important are the small ideas, though, because to get a leader's head around AI or any technology for that matter, it's important to deliver some bite-sized chunk where you can point to something and say, look, we can achieve this particular thing that's very visible and tangible in a short and achievable time frame. That to me is equally as important, because the smaller things that are bite-sized we can digest and we can understand better.
Mm-hmm.
And that leads to a faster kind of ability to climb the learning curve than does the big idea, which takes longer almost by definition to materialize.
Yeah, and I asked that on the kind of front end of, basically the literature out there. Harvard Business Review basically just said that, 2.5 years is the lifespan of a CDO. Why is that? How do you avoid, one, that being that statistic, but why is that? Why are the tenures so short right now?
It's a hard role. It's a hard role. I mean, and I think it has to do with the fact that, particularly in the early days of CDOs, coming into a company where there is not very much structure or infrastructure, I could say, around the data. You're coming into just this pile of data.
Right.
You've got a lot of work on your hands to get that data organized and usable, and get what are called data masters, which is a single source of truth for that data. Like, there is so much work to be done to get the data to be usable. So I think that's one piece of it. I think the other piece is, getting alignment on what people want is extremely difficult also. I think that people have a broad or generalized understanding or expectation around what they want from analytics, and they know they want analytics, they know they want AI, they know they want machine learning or data science, but don't necessarily know what that looks like, and have to be in this role of CDO. You have to actually sell ideas.
Mm.
It's not you're not just coming in and being given the ideas and the projects and being told, hey, good, let's go do this. We have a firm idea. It's really typically pretty fuzzy. And that's been probably one of the harder things for me to kind of understand about this role, is just how nebulous it can be, and how important it is to be an executive facing stakeholder and really work with the business to define how AI can work for the business. It's not going to be fed to you in this role. So I think that's a contributing factor to the difficulty of the role. But there are probably a million others that I could cite.
Well, and that really begs the question of, like, what's the ideal? Like, if you could create the situation that you were in with infrastructure, the foresight of the organization ahead of time, setting things up, what is the kind of the perfect position to be in with the skill set that you have right now? How could you get the most impact from your experience with an organization? What does that look like?
Yeah, so I think it looks like having a really good CDO who has already done a lot of the prerequisite work for pipelining. Mm-hmm. Like that work. And the reason I say that is, if you look at it's often been said, I've seen it so many different places and different times in conferences and different papers, and even have really kind of, in my own experience, I would agree with this, that any analytics project typically takes 80 to 90% of the time is spent on the data engineering aspects of that project. Mm-hmm. I think those numbers can go significantly down if you've got good pipelining built. And so, being set up to me means having those pipelines pre-built by a great CDO, because then you can come in and actually do the analytics work without the overhead of 80 to 90% of data engineering, right? And back to your question, let's go reflect back on the question just a second ago of kind of the short tenure. That's another contributing factor, is that the executive team has in mind that they want some analytics outputs, and you come in and say, well, okay, in order to achieve that, we're going to have to spend 80 to 90% of our time just building up the prerequisite data engineering pipelines. that kind of kills the ROI of a project pretty quickly, right, in the minds of the executive team. And so
Yeah.
there's not much patience for that much time being required to build the pipelines. And so, for optimal setup, having a company where they've really already thought that through, that's the ideal.
I thought one of the most interesting things, just talking with you, was your medical background with AI. Just, I didn't realize, and I think this is profound, that, AI is going to save a lot of lives. How was your research? Just maybe a bit of your research and some of the medical work that you see out there that AI can really double down on.
Yeah, so my research and my PhD work, and actually a company I built and ultimately sold, was based off of predicting heart attacks using AI. So using the EKG signal and using artificial intelligence to predict heart attacks. But looking at AI in medicine in general, you're right, is incredibly exciting. I think where AI really took a foothold, kind of early days, was with medical imaging. We saw that medical imaging, bots could effectively read medical images and surpass the accuracy of physicians in diagnosing certain things from medical images. And so, that was the first very exciting thing to see. And, so much so that kind of radiologists, I think, felt threatened by it. Now I think, as with all AI, we look at that as sort of an augmentation tool, right? It's AI is doing a preliminary read and the radiologist sort of follows on. But AI in that context, in the imaging context, has been very exciting for years. I think beyond that, it's interesting. We saw an attempt at AI with Watson, with IBM's Watson, that kind of fell flat. Mm-hmm. But now that things have really turned back around, and I think with the onset of generative AI and the new technologies that have emerged with transformer models and large language models, we're going to see that medicine is very positively impacted, for sure.
Yeah. Are there any other fields you think that are, that's health is generally one of those things. I think all of us, as we get older, we start to realize how important it is. You want it when you don't have it. But what are some of the maybe other insights in that area, or other big industries that you think are important to think about if you're in leadership?
Yeah, so I think that just in terms of industries that are important, and this may not be directly addressing your question, but I think one of the most incredibly exciting areas to think about the application of AI is in drug discovery and development. Using generative AI to actually create molecules and to create an understanding and to create protein folding models and all these things that AI is being used for. It's absolutely astounding, right? To think that we could have AI creating drugs effectively. Now we're a ways away from that, and there's still a lot of work to be done there. But that to me is going to be kind of like, that's kind of where AI just becomes a scary miracle at that point.
So other things that you think about that you would like to share with people that you think are just the big pillars of AI right now?
Yeah, so I think, look, I think that getting in, and this will be a little bit repetitive, but I think getting into that multimodal type of AI that you just described is going to be really, really cool to see how these different pieces of AI come together to create kind of a sum greater than or a whole greater than the sum of its parts, right? I think we're gonna see that, and what exactly that looks like. For me, is hard to imagine right now. I just know that it's going to be impressive, right? So I think that's one area where we can expect cool things to happen. I think that the continuation of and the continued improvement of large language models for various subspecialties, like medical, for example, is going to be really impressive. And we're going to see just continued really cool things come from that.
I really appreciate it, Matt. That was a great conversation. I learned a lot. I know our viewers will too. I really appreciate your time.
Likewise, Jimmy. Really enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Matt.